When it comes to dangerous dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park franchise, none come to mind quite as quickly as the savage Velociraptor. Appearing as a small pack of bloodthirsty killers in the first movie, these hyper-intelligent animals have left quite a lasting impression on the film series' history. Even in the newer Jurassic World movies, raptors have proven to be overtly violent and often end their encounters with human beings in a pretty terrible bloodbath. That being said, it's important for us to note that the place from which these raptors get their incredibly iconic intelligence happens to be in Michael Crichton's original novels. You see, velociraptors actually play central roles in both Jurassic Park and the Lost World. These 1990s novels are what inspired the animals that we see today up on the big screen. The way they were written and the way they were said to tear into their prey and eviscerate their victims is well remembered by anyone who's happened to pick up their own copies of the books. The deaths of humans in these novels aren't exactly PG-13, if you know what I mean. And today, I actually wanted to talk about one of the more memorable ones. During the latter parts of the second novel, a Biosyn lackey manages to locate a way off of the island. It turns out that a nearby boat may be his only ticket to safety and freedom out of Isla Sorna. However, on his way over to the vessel, he falls into quite a lot of dangerous situations, and it turns out that the boat he's trying to get to is just about to ship off. If he wants to survive, he's going to have to run. He's going to have to go into the long grass. King gasped for breath. He emerged from the jungle and walked out onto the plain. At last he could see where he was. He paused. He was soaked and muddy. He was disappointed to find that he was nowhere near the boat. In fact, it looked as if he was on the wrong side of the road. He was facing a broad grassy plain. A river was coursing through it. The plain was mostly deserted, although there were several dinosaurs farther down the banks. Looks like the horned ones. Triceratops, he thought. The big adults were raising their heads up and down, making barking noises. Obviously, it looks like he's going to have to follow the river until it brought him to the boat. But he'd have to be careful getting past these Triceratops. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a candy bar. Ripping off the wrapper, he continued to watch the trikes, wishing they would go away. How long would it take him to reach the boat? That was the only question on his mind. He decided to move, Triceratops or not. He began walking through the tall grass. And then he heard a reptilian hiss. It was coming from the grass, somewhere to his left. He noticed a smell, a peculiar rotten odor. The candy bar didn't taste so good anymore. Then from behind him, he heard splashing. It was coming from the river. King turned to look back. He saw two dark, striped lizards moving across the river. They walked on their hind legs with a sort of hopping motion. They snapped their long jaws and hissed menacingly. He glanced upstream and saw another lizard closing in, and another beyond that. Those other animals were already deep in the water and had begun to swim. Howard King backed away from the river, moving deeper into the tall grass. Then he turned and ran. He was chest deep in grass, running hard, gasping for breath, when suddenly another lizard head rose up in front of him. He dodged, changing directions, but suddenly the nearest lizard leapt in the air. The creature jumped so high its body cleared the grass. He could see the entire animal flying, its two hind legs raised to pounce. King turned again, and the lizard shrieked as it landed on the ground behind him. He ran on. He was energized by pure fear. Behind him, he heard the lizard snarling. He ran hard. Ahead was another 20 yards of grassy clearing, and then the jungle began again. He saw trees. They were big trees. He could climb one and get away. Off to the left, there was another lizard moving diagonally across the clearing towards him. King could only see the head above the grass. The lizard seemed to be moving incredibly fast. He thought, I'm not going to make it, but he would try. Panting, lungs searing, he sprinted for the trees. Only 10 more yards to go. His arms pumped, his legs churned, his breath came in ragged gasps. And then something heavy struck him from behind. It forced him to the ground and he felt searing pain down his back. He knew it was the claws. They dug into the flesh of his back and he was knocked down again. He hit the dirt hard and tried to roll, but the animal on his back held on. He was not going to be able to move. Pinned down on his stomach, hearing the animal snarl behind him, the pain in his back was excruciating, dizzying. And then he felt the animal's hot breath on the back of his neck. He heard the snorting breath, and his terror was extreme. Then suddenly, a kind of lassitude, a deep and welcome sleepiness overtook him. Everything became slow. As if in a dream, he could see all the blades of grass in the ground in front of his face. He saw them with a kind of languid intensity, and he almost didn't mind the sharp pain on his neck. He almost did not care that his neck was within the animal's hot jaws. It seemed to be happening to someone else. He was many, many miles away. He had a moment of surprise when he felt the bones of his neck crunching loudly. And then blackness. Nothing. Up in the high-hide, Dr. Thorne told Arby and Kelly to look away. He drew the boy towards his chest, but Arby impatiently pushed away again. He was watching what was happening. Thorne reached for Kelly, but she stepped away from him, and she also stared out at the plane. "Don't look," Thorne kept saying. "Don't look." The kids watched in silence. Levine focused his binoculars on the kill. There were now 5 raptors snarling around King's body, tearing viciously at his carcass. They watched as one of the raptors jerked its head up, tearing away a piece of blood-soaked shirt. Another was shaking the man's severed head in its jaws before finally dropping it to the ground. Here it was every animal for itself. The frenzied raptors hopped and ducked their heads as they tore the body to pieces, and there was plenty of nipping and fighting amongst themselves. One particular raptor came up, with something brown hanging from its jaws. The animal got an odd expression on its face as it chewed. Then it turned away from the rest of the pack and held the brown object carefully in its forearms. Levine gave it a moment to recognize what it was doing, and then he realized it was eating a candy bar, and it seemed to be enjoying it. So much so that it didn't want to share with any of the other raptors. The dinosaur turned back and buried its long nose in the bloody carcass again. From across the plain, other animals were racing towards the feast. Furiously snarling, they threw themselves into the fray. Levine lowered his glasses and looked at the 2 kids. They were staring silently, but calmly at the kill. The death of Howard King is a pretty memorable moment in Michael Crichton's second Jurassic novel. In fact, one could argue that it is so memorable that it happened to get extended into multiple deaths in the movie adaptation. In my personal opinion, Eddie Carr's death in the book is probably a bit cooler than what happens to Howard King, but that doesn't mean that it isn't a good kill in its own right. Just the fact that Crichton chose to undercut the man's death with a bit of levity when the raptor starts to eat the human's candy bar really makes it pretty iconic to me. That being said, the imagery of Velociraptors dangling flesh and even a severed head from their mouths is probably something that stuck with a lot of people who first read this book. I really think that if you haven't already read through both of Crichton's novels, you may want to go ahead and give them a shot before JP6 comes out. You never know what kind of awesome stuff just might be able to make its way in there. Now before I go, I want to thank all of my game wardens, as well as all of my InGen executives. I'd also like to thank all of my park workers and InGen hunters as well. Just the fact that you guys watch these videos and support my content means the world to me, and I want to make sure that all of you never forget that. Now I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to watch today's video, and hope that you all had fun. I'll see you all in the next one, guys, and as always, take it easy.